What's cracking, people? It's your man, Cousin T, aka the Alpha Wingman, representing high-level technicians, operating globally and beyond. So listen, today I wanted to present the 7th part in the Male Octane Observation series, and today, of course, we're covering the 85 octane male. Now, what's interesting about this particular octane is that it is not a naturally occurring expression of a social identity along the spectrum of either vocational expressions or socioeconomic expressions. The 85 octane is a product, in my observation. It is a product of very specific, very targeted, very mechanized, very systematically produced factors within an environment which then yield a particular product. Hence the term product of environment. Okay? And when searching for an ideal candidate for a case study that would represent the 85 octane, I went through a few scenarios, but no better example could be found than that of Jody, played by Tyrese Gibson of the famous movie Baby Boy from director John Singleton. Now, beyond just this being a great case study example, when we think about the opening scene of the movie Baby Boy, we have this image of Jody in the womb. And there are many articles written about what this symbolizes. And of course, John Singleton himself explained how this image symbolizes the infantilization of the black man or many black men. But I want to stretch this scene out a bit further. See, Baby Boy was released in 2001. I want to take it back 3 years prior to that, to 1999, to this particular image from the Matrix movie. Now, obviously, it shows another perspective of what it means to be in a state of arrested development, but not only as a specific group, i.e. black men in America, but as humanity itself. And as wise men have already stated in this space, the black community has always been the experiment for the greater of society and also humanity, as is evidenced by the following. Of course, we all know of the mouse utopia experiment and how that subsequently translated into the projects, literally. But it didn't stop there. Fast forward, and there are major plans that were made in an overseas superpower that led to 250 million of its rural residents being relocated, air quotes, into mega cities. So they're forced off of land that have been in their families for centuries, where they earned a living, where they were able to support themselves and feed themselves and clothe and house themselves, into these mega cities where they have to be completely dependent upon the government. Now, this translates even further with the attempt of a company named WeWork. Those who are familiar with corporate spaces know that WeWork was an innovation and shared space among offices. Prior to the flop of an IPO, they were in the works for building out We Live. And this article from the New York Times brings back that famous word, utopia. A utopia situation for shared living spaces. So, full circle, the experimental group has given way to what would be projected as a global rollout of a societal version of Connect 4. But anyway, getting back to the original discussion, Again, major shout out goes to the master teacher BGS IBMOR for providing us with such an elegant model in the Octane model. Now, I will admit, I did not use the full scale in my book, The Seduction Scriptures, because as a rule, when I do refer to the Octane model in terms of seduction, in terms of, man gets woman, I always advise men against targeting 85 octane women, because of the fact that the 85 octane is the product of a highly manipulated and artificially produced environment. Let me say that one more time. The segment of the population belonging to the 85 octane grade are the product of a highly manipulated, artificially produced environment. Now, I won't get too far off into the weeds in this space in terms of social structuring and geopolitical movements that are taking place across the greater chessboard. I reserve that for my higher levels of my Patreon. Shout out to the high-tech technicians, where we discuss frequently global chess. But I do need to point out that in this seduction space, in the space of identifying a target of someone that you desire to acquire for whatever reason, for a committed relationship, for a roster position, for a one-night stand, or whatever, you need to know what you're observing. But before that, you need to know who you are, where you are in your space, specifically in the world, in your world, and in the greater society. That's why I'm using this space for this little tangent. And just to wrap up this first part, when we look for tangible elements that represent the manipulation of a culture and the artificial presentation of what the social engineers want a culture to look like, or a segment of a culture to look like, look no further than hip-hop music. There is a video that I'm going to link below that I think it's on my top 10 YouTube videos list. Hopefully it's still there at the time of producing this podcast, but I highly recommend people go there. If you're a hip-hop head, go there. If you're just a casual observer who happened to like what hip-hop used to be, definitely go there, because what this particular presentation shows, step by step, point by point, it was great work done by Justin Hunt. It shows the exact year down to 2 specific albums that meant the end of classic hip-hop and the beginning of mainstream artificially positioned music. And here we see the decision made in prior to 1996, but implemented in 1996 by the FCC, how the type of hip-hop music that historically represented the voice of revolution, that represented a robust tapestry of people who had a collection of different experiences from different perspectives, from different socioeconomic positions. Again, shout out to the Octane scale that actually represented more accurately the collective diversity of the artists who were presenting music and documents that encapsulated the moment across a span of time. That all met its end with a decision in 1996. I highly recommend that you take a look at that video. But coming from that, we see that the manipulated state of hip-hop as an expression of how calculated the production of the 85 octane class is so apparent. It's so blatant that I don't think that there's an argument to be made either way. But I want to present this really quick. Forgive me for not being as thoughtful as I should or could be, but I'll leave that up to people who are really true hip hop and rap aficionados and historians to clarify this list, but I wanted to put up something that shows the value of the Octane scale and how it can be applied in so many spaces. Now, for me, I use it here in this space to exemplify the difference in targets for seduction and showing men who they are and where they stand in terms of how you should, what your view and how you should project towards your target woman should be. But in reality, the Octane scale in its application is limitless. It can be applied to so many things. Case in point, it can be definitely applied to real hip hop. So real hip hop represents, or represented at one point, the full spectrum of the Octane scale. And like I said before, when you're doing research, when you're using data points, when you're using and bringing actual evidence into a space, having a metric that you can weigh your argument or your presentation against, like the metric of the Octane scale, gives your points, gives your data, gives your information a framing so that it makes sense to whomever you're presenting it to. So this frame is as follows. We go from the 100 to the 92 to the 89, 87, but finally the 85, which interestingly enough, most people, especially in other countries and in other societies, when they hear hip hop or they hear rap music, they immediately think, oh, 85 octane. Or they think about low class, or they think about poverty, they think about welfare, they think about jail, they think about all the negative traits of how this artificially produced segment of a society project itself, when the reality could not be further from the truth. And I use this example as such. But when we look at the bottom, and it shows gangster rap, gangster music, trap, whatever you want to classify. I did not specify artists because right now all artists, the majority of artists, let me just be clear, the majority of artists play to that lowest space. And to be honest, anyone who attempts to defend this trend is either too ignorant to really have a conversation, it's not really worth having a conversation with, or is a willing agent of the perpetuation of this trash phenomena. But before I get into the description of today's case study, I just want to point out these two graphs. For years, developed nations have always had a stratified class system. It's what makes a society grow and keep up its competition and its position with the global society, allowing people to elevate to their potential on their terms and seek out vocations that satisfy what their personal purpose is or their mission is, are the tenets of an ideal society. Now, how the fourth industrial revolution tends to upend and disrupt a lot of that remains to be seen, and that's another conversation for another day. But I just wanted to show you these two graphics. The first one breaking down the London class system, and as you can see, there are identifiable qualities and traits, and also tangible dollar signs that can be, or pounds, British pounds, that can be attributed to certain levels of the class system. And under ideal circumstances, this is how a civilization and a society functions. But obviously, there are political, cultural, and tribal interests that tend to suppress, derail, and to ultimately reduce the amount of certain segments of the population from attaining to every level in the class system. And no other populace has a more glaring example of that than this: the Indian caste system. Now, you want to talk about segments of the population that are locked into an artificially suppressed society. That is the glaring example. I won't go any further than that, but I use these examples to show that the Octane scale, the Octane model, is not only sound, but it is strong enough to stand with the other more established class system observations, but also to segue into today's case study, when we think about what the 85 Octane represents in terms of being a product of social engineering. So let's get into the case study. So today's case study for the 85 Octane male is none other than Jody, aka Tyrese Gibson. His world is Compton, California. Sex he identifies as male. Height 5'11", weight 172 pounds. Octane grade, of course, 85. Now salary range is unknown. Net worth is in the shadow economy. And an interesting thought about that is I think I'll produce two sides to the flex fuel or the flex grade within the male octane spectrum, because there's obviously a very, very, very controversial side to that, but I think that there may be something that I can present on the YouTube side that's more friendly. We see in the movie Baby Boy examples of how Jody exercised his movement flexibility within the shadow economy, in that he would get items that were quote unquote have fallen off the back of a truck. Now, where we heard that, we hear that used in certain spaces all over, across ethnic backgrounds, across cultural lines. It's a very significant part of that world. Getting back to this, his identifiers: tank top or t-shirt in terms of clothing. It's definitely a uniform, just like the suit and tie is part of the uniform for the 92 Octane. Do-rag, sagging pants. Meticulous shoe game, though. That shoe game is on point. Environment of operation: red-lined urban spaces. Very specific. Say it again slower. Red-lined urban spaces. Also, post-Black Flight rural areas. So we've got a huge dynamic there in terms of the artificial grafting, the artificial manipulation of the environment leading to the problem. Skill sets: projection of charisma, how he's able to navigate certain spaces, especially with the opposite sex, being able to charm women and to talk shit to other men. Able to mask and compartmentalize constant traumas. Now, I really wanted to make sure that I presented this piece because the skill set of being able to mask and compartmentalize is what allows certain people, but in particular the 85 Octane, to navigate certain spaces, but in particular the space of their environment to a point, because when you have to mask and compartmentalize so much trauma, there's only so much that you can mask and compartmentalize before you have these outbursts. But what comes with that is a lot of triggers. And so this is the protocol for a sleeper agent, which is another conversation for another day. But basically, the 85 Octane triggers tend to be sirens, obviously, from the authority officials, gunshots, cars with bass in the trunk, seeming disrespect from other 85 Octane males, not necessarily people who are in authority, judges, bailiffs, lawyers, attorneys, people who have a controlling interest in his environment. But most importantly, the 85 Octane female is one of the biggest triggers for an 85 Octane male, because she is the one that sets the tone and calibrates the majority of his traumatic triggers that he then has to mask and compartmentalize just in order to survive in his environment. Look at the example of a 92 climber female, right? Perfect case study was Molly from the Insecure series, who was also from Compton. And now I don't want to make this an indictment for 92 climbers or anyone who started in the environment of an 85 Octane at all. But the evidence given in the show shows that despite her achieving large amounts of wins and successes, there was a lot that she still had masked and compartmentalized. and that when she was triggered, she got to the point of wanting to literally fight her friend in public during an event that she was supposed to be supporting her friend. None of that mattered in the moment that she was triggered. So fortunately, the series discussed mental health and getting help, and therapy is something that is truly necessary in a lot of spaces where there was a lot of traumas. There's a lot of masking of triggers and a lot of compartmentalizing of unaddressed traumas that are part of the manufactured and artificial environment that is created specifically for the purpose of producing this result. So moving forward, what he values: vicarious luxury. What does that mean? Well, we go back to the music of the culture. If Louis Vuitton belts are promoted, if Balenciaga bags are promoted, if foreign cars are promoted, even though you're still projecting the tenets and the behaviors and the outbursts and the low level of civility of the 85 octane space, it doesn't matter what you're wearing externally. I'll be doing a presentation on what luxury truly is on the Patreon side, but when you look for the would-be trappings of luxury, despite being in a virtual war zone of an environment, it is not only a cry for help, but it is yet another masking and overcompensation for being socially castrated. Again, another conversation for another day, but we will continue forward with the case study. What he values also, the culture of the cage. Again, all of the elements within the 85 octane environment are what are reinforced in cultural expressions like music, film, television, wall star, social media, all of these other reinforcements of that cage, of the culture of the cage. Also, he values keeping it real, in air quotes. Now, this is another conversation for another day, but I'll briefly just put this out there, referring to the godfather of real rap, real hip hop, Mr. Gil Scott-Heron, and his recent reappearance in the Lovecraft series. What it means to keep it real is to keep it revolutionary. Google Whitey on the Moon and you'll understand what I'm talking about. Moving on, the final two things that the 85 octane male appreciates or values are the come up, which is another reference to getting it from the dirt, because if you are from the dirt, you're from the lowest space on the socioeconomic scale, the only way that you can go is up. Lastly, thug passion. And I tell you, the love scene in the movie Baby Boy was, I'm sure, a coming of age moment for a lot of guys, and that it showed real passion. It showed just raw, carnal, just emotion, and just that energy that every man wishes that the women or the woman that he chooses, the woman that he wants to engage with, would just show to him. The space of complete and utter submissive release that Taraji P. Henson, aka Yvette, showed in that moment was something that cemented into the minds of a lot of women that, damn, thug passion is the way to get it, to get that itch scratched, so to speak. And the way that she reacted to Jody's dominance, to Jody's presence, to how he presented himself as command of that particular dynamic, showed a lot of men that, damn, if I present myself as a thug, then damn, I'm gonna get this reaction from women, and I will get that space of submission. I will get that ultimate release that gives me the true satisfaction of being the alpha commander of that space. There's a lot more that goes into that, but I just wanted to present this case study for the 85 octane male. Let me know what your thoughts and opinions are down below. Definitely click on that one video that talks about the fork in the road for hip hop. And as always, this is your man Cousin T, aka the Alpha Wingman, saying stay sharp and mission focused. Later.